tell me quickly about your project?
Sure.
Like this thing you do?
Yeah. Political debate, right? Just debate clubs for high school students, middle students, almost all in America because it's an American style. So it's focused on American interests typically. And yeah, we just put out lectures for all the topics, but I like to supplement the lectures with interviews with professionals because it's I think good to see the sort of natural conversation and yeah, sort of get a just a professional's take on things, and also get some quotes that aren't just in the evidence. It kind of gives people a little bit of an edge, potentially if they use it well.
Well, I did a little bit of debate in high school, and then I helped when I was teaching middle and high school. I helped the debate coach. I tried judging a little bit because, when you're the coach, you have to judge at the tournaments, and that was extremely hard. And one of my kids did some debate in a school where the debate team was really good. And so I am always happy to, help high school debaters. One of my best friends in college was the NFL debate champion of the US for 1984.
Wow, that's amazing. I'm happy you have this personal connection with debate too. I think people fall in love with the sport if they have some connection to it, but not everyone really does.
Yeah. So anyway, that's why I'm happy to do this. And I have to get on another call at 4:00, but we can talk.
No worries. We'll get you free a few minutes before that for sure. Okay. Can you first tell me, so I have sort of your bio from 2017, and I don't know if anything's changed. Can you tell me just a little bit about your position and your own self bio, I suppose?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Shelly Rigger. I teach political science at Davidson College, which is in North Carolina. And my main area of teaching is East Asian politics, and my main area of research and scholarship, so my own writing, is mostly focused on Taiwan's domestic politics, Taiwan PRC relations, and then US-Taiwan PRC relations. So my most recent book, which came out just about a year ago, is called The Tiger Leading the Dragon. And it's about how Taiwanese companies helped to develop business and especially export-oriented manufacturing in mainland China.
Fascinating. Why, on just a personal note, how did you get into this? How did Taiwan become a fascination of yours?
Yeah, I studied Chinese in college. I was always interested in learning Chinese language from the time I was a little kid for reasons unknown. But I studied Chinese in college, and I was in college when it was very early in people traveling from the US to mainland China. And I had a course about Taiwan, and I got interested in a topic. Specifically the kind of government policy toward Taiwan's indigenous peoples, who make up about 2% of Taiwan's population. And because I was going to the kind of school where they had a lot of resources to help students do incredible things, I got to spend the summer between my junior and senior year in Taiwan researching that topic. And then when I got to graduate school, I was expecting to write about minority politics in mainland China, but it was 1989 and I had to make a dissertation decision. And at that time, after the June 4th crisis, it wasn't clear that I would be able to go to China, and certainly minority politics even then. And so I was thinking about going to the Northwest where the Uyghurs live, who have become a very hot topic as well. It was clear that I would not be able to go there and do research and write a dissertation in that political environment. So instead, I went back to Taiwan, and I've been working on Taiwan ever since.
That's amazing. That's beautiful. I also spent like 5 years in Taiwan. I just came back after 3 years in China too. So I feel like we could talk for days or weeks about this.
Yeah, we definitely could.
But to stick to the topic, here's the resolution that I sent to you. The United States should establish a comprehensive bilateral trade agreement with Taiwan. So there's some specific things here, but essentially the pros and cons of the U.S. developing some large formal economic ties with Taiwan. First, can I get your hot take? What is your initial reaction to if the U.S. should, set up a BTA with Taiwan or not?
Yeah, so one of the things that makes this a little bit tricky as a question is that debaters need to be aware that what you call this agreement could alter the feasibility of it. So certain kinds of labels apply to formal diplomatic relationships. So it may be that a free trade agreement gives Taiwan, and this is something people can investigate for themselves, but just sort of a lead on an idea.
The definitions really matter here.
Right. So a free trade agreement might seem to suggest that Taiwan is a state and that the US is acknowledging that in an official way. And that would be very hard for the PRC to tolerate. And it would make the process a lot more difficult. So another possibility is to find another framework or another language for labeling what the agreement is. And that might also affect the specific content of the agreement. But if an agreement could be made in a way that didn't put Taiwan in a dangerous position relative to mainland China, to the PRC, I think it's a good idea. I think the most urgent need for Taiwan in terms of continuing to be able to be a self-governing and democratic entity is economic, is to continue to have a strong economy. And the big danger there is that Taiwan will become economically marginalized, that everybody else will be in these free trade clubs, these agreements, and Taiwan will not be in any of them. And that would be really bad. So while some people think the US should ramp up its kind of security commitment to Taiwan, I think actually the economic piece is more important. And so I am an advocate of a trade agreement of some kind, but not just kind of blithely going forward with something that might bring down the wrath of Xi Jinping and the Chinese leadership on Taiwan.
Understand. Do you think there's any danger talking about like U.S. internal policy? I mean, in relation to Taiwan, do you think there's any danger of that happening, of our lawmakers blundering into something that they shouldn't?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
I think the biggest wild card in US PRC-Taiwan relations is the US at the sort of national level and Congress at the subnational level, because it's really easy to listen to a partial voice, or a voice that is not disinterested and that is not giving you the whole story. So I think in Congress in particular, it's really easy to hear certain people say, China is bad. We need to do things to sort of push back against China. China is bullying Taiwan. So therefore, whatever we do that we think is going to be good for Taiwan is bad for China. And that kind of logic is just bad, because it makes Taiwan a tool of US foreign policy rather than an end in itself. And it also obscures the risks and dangers associated with some of the policy choices that people in the US might make. And just to give an example, during President Tsai Ing-wen, so Taiwan's president is Tsai Ing-wen, and during her first term of office, which was 2016 to 2020, there was a movement in Congress to invite her. And in fact, they voted to issue an invitation, if I remember correctly, to speak to a joint session of Congress. And this is the kind of thing that in Beijing, they would have to seriously consider whether that was going to require military action against Taiwan. Like that is such a strong assertion of Taiwan's statehood that, I can't say how that debate would have been resolved in Beijing, but this is the kind of thing that is worst case scenario or second to the worst case scenario for the PRC leadership. And so the Taiwan side had to say, this isn't a convenient time, but thank you very much for your kind invitation. When in fact, what I think they were probably thinking was, oh my gosh, this is so dangerous. Why would they put us in this position?
Yeah,
and I think Congress are the ones who don't understand when they're putting Taiwan in an awkward position.
But you have more faith in the sort of national policy of the Taiwan leadership.
At the moment, definitely. And I think just in general, we've never really had a president in Taiwan who didn't understand the potential cost of certain actions and who was not prudent about taking actions.
Understand. So this topic, again, there's two sides, of course, right? Like, yes, the US should form this trade agreement. No, they should not. And the way that I've looked at it after, granted, only several days of research is, something like on the pro side, there's some economic benefits, maybe for both sides. And on the con, there's maybe the biggest impact things are obviously military arguments, perhaps, although they're a little bit harder to prove for sure, right? So there's some things that economically, like, okay, that's certainly going to happen. And militarily, okay, it could be a lot worse, but it's a little bit, the probability is more fuzzy. Do you think this is an okay framing, sort of on a very, very high level?
I do, but I also think we got to remember that in the US, there will be pushback on the economic dimension as well. So another line of argument that one could make is that Taiwan is a very powerful economy, a small economy, but one that is wildly more important and successful than its actual, the size of the population or the physical size of the country would suggest.
Right.
So we should be careful about giving Taiwan privileged access to US markets or, other things. Taiwan is less of a kind of trade frenemy than they used to be, like back in the day, Taiwan definitely engaged in some of the practices that China is routinely criticized for now. Taiwan has gotten a lot better, but it is still, wages are lower there, salaries are lower, cost of production is lower. In some ways, probably some of the environmental stuff is probably, regulation is weaker. So, I think there are people who would say, why are we making free trade agreements with anyone? Okay, that's one economic argument. And then the other economic argument that I think would be really fun to try to make as a debater is what to do about Taiwan's semiconductor manufacturing capacity. Because a lot of people would say Taiwan as a whole is a very big player in global semiconductor manufacturing, specifically these foundries where they make chips that are designed by other companies. And so that it at the sort of most basic level, it's already very important. But then what's really important is that one Taiwanese company, TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Corporation, is a couple generations ahead of any other chip manufacturer in terms of technological sophistication.
Right.
So some people say this is really protective of Taiwan because, no one dares to mess with Taiwan because everyone, including China, would be really, really hurt if Taiwan's semiconductor manufacturing capacity was disrupted. But another thing that I hear Americans say is basically this technology is too important to let Taiwan keep it, that TSMC should be investing in the US and manufacturing this stuff here. And there's all kinds of reasons not to like that kind of argumentation, starting with like,
Yeah.
it's their technology, it's their country, they get to like make the stuff in their country. But there are a lot of interesting things that you can play with around what does it mean for this very geostrategically endangered place to be the sole source of the cutting edge inputs to things like military, all kinds of military technology and all kinds of other stuff that we all really need.
Yeah, that's true. I think that will be sort of a lot of the major arguments on both sides will be about that. Again, even just we could talk about TSMC for 5 hours. It's So here's one of the biggest issues about the free trade agreement as far as, let's say, the con side goes, some defense against it is when you just look at tariffs, they're already quite low. And then the goods that the tariffs are on are, few and maybe not that important. Maybe pork imports is the number one thing. And okay, like how much do, pork imports to Taiwan really matter, right? And then you look at leather or different things that I'm sure impact some people, but is this really worth on balance, potentially upsetting China? Because even a low level, sort of below threshold agreement would still certainly be upsetting. And then the opportunity cost of, let's say, for example, a free trade agreement with China, which would be 500 times bigger or something, than Taiwan, and certainly which would become impossible, with an agreement like that with Taiwan. Why would there still be economic incentives for a trade agreement, just given the trade-offs?
So I think for some industries, there's always economic incentives, right? There's always somebody who's going to benefit from loosening things up. Taiwan has been targeted by some of the Trump era trade sanctions. So I think steel and aluminum. And I don't know exactly where those tariffs stand with the Biden administration, but our friends were not exempt from the Trump trade war. And so Taiwan definitely, I think there is still room for reopening some things. And, so there are industries that would benefit, but I also have to acknowledge that most of the time when I hear this conversation in Washington or at international conferences, the conversation shifts very quickly to the strategic benefit of helping Taiwan sustain itself as this kind of self-governing democratic state with a economy that is operating outside and beyond the reach of the Chinese Communist Party leadership. So I think to make the economic case, you'll have to do some research. I think you can make an economic case, but I think for a lot of people who are advocating a free trade agreement of some kind, the motivation is more political.
I see. So there could be some tangential benefits to the US, but that's kind of not the point for a lot of people. The point is sort of economic security for Taiwan.
Right. You said that way better than I did.
I'm recycling your words. That's all. Okay. Very, very interesting. Now, as you've said, sort of the key strategic, there's maybe many key strategic reasons that Taiwan is so important to the U.S. and to China both. How does the importance of the semiconductor industry, which again is important for I believe the number was like 90% of the most advanced chips in the world, like as far as manufacturing capacity, and so that this interaction between their importance as a chip manufacturer, and their importance as like, you know, being close to China and having the history with China. Do you think that the history and politics with China, is that secondary, or is it even important? Or how, I mean, how do you see that play? Because I've heard arguments, very strong arguments, that it's really about, you know, one or the other.
So it is certainly true that Taiwan served as a bridge between international firms and the PRC labor force for about 20 to 25 years. And without, I mean, the argument in my book, not to keep pushing the, the tiger leading the dragon, kids.
Please do, please do, push it.
But the, you know, the argument of that book is that without Taiwanese investors going into the mainland and not just taking money, because, you know, there's two kinds of investment, right? There's portfolio investment, which is a company exists, we're buying shares of it. And then there's direct productive investment. And that is, I am moving a factory, I am building a factory in this other place. And that's the kind of investment that the Taiwanese firms did. So companies that were already working for international branded clients. So, you know, they were making shoes for Nike or dolls for Mattel, or, you know, any number of other things for any number of other companies, little transistor radios for Sony. They, between about 1987 and 2000, picked up those operations and moved them to mainland China. And the reason they did that was that the price of land, labor, and utilities was really low in China. And local Chinese officials were making all kinds of very concessionary arrangements to attract them. So like, no taxes for 5 years, and then after that we'll negotiate what your taxes will be. That kind of concessionary arrangements. So the reason why, you know, your Mattel product, your Apple product, your Nike product now says made in China on it is not because some Chinese company got really good at doing that and said to Mattel, can I do that for you? It's because a Taiwanese company started doing that work in mainland China. So, you know, it's the export is from China, but the expertise and the contracting relationship is actually with a Taiwanese firm. So that is one of the ways in which Taiwan served as a bridge between, or Taiwanese entities, Taiwanese people and companies served as a bridge between the outside world and the emerging PRC manufacturing economy. However, that is no longer a very, I mean, there are still lots of Taiwanese companies in China who are doing that kind of thing. It's starting with Foxconn, which is making all our iPhones. You know, the component, the amount of value that's added to this thing in China is pretty tiny compared to what you pay for it. But the whole thing says made in China on the box, right? So there are lots of companies that are still, Taiwanese companies that are still in China, but the opportunities to grow that business model and to expand on that relationship are receding rapidly. So I think what we will see is more and more attention to the virtue of Taiwan's own domestic R&D capabilities. And so, you know, things like semiconductors and other high-end manufacturers, because the Taiwanese firms will still be making a lot of stuff. You know, they'll be making the shoes, they'll be making the Barbie dolls, but not in China. So some things will be made in Taiwan, like bicycles. A lot of bicycle manufacturing has reshored back to Taiwan because they can actually do it for a good price there, and they get better quality and less loss of intellectual property. or it's being offshored to an even cheaper platform than mainland China. Did that answer your question?
It answered, I think, a different question that was much better to answer. Almost. So to rephrase one of your points, what you're saying is the economic importance of Taiwan for America has been for quite a long time as a bridge to China, essentially. But that role as a bridge is decreasing in importance, and the role as just manufacturing or the companies, whatever they do, is increasing.
Yes. And, you know, the question, another really interesting question for people to think about is just, what are we building a bridge to in China? You know, like what opportunities do exist for foreign companies in the PRC? The sort of foreign direct investment into PRC manufacturing has fallen off a cliff since the first quarter of 2022. And that may be just COVID, but it may be that COVID is the kind of trigger for companies that have been starting to waver in their conviction about China as a reliable manufacturing platform for some time. And now it's like, okay, we gotta reconsider whether China's where we're gonna keep putting our money.
Is there any possible future where that trend reverses? You know, this is the big, I mean, it's one of these big impact things, but it might just be a ridiculous thing to even say that, you know, a Taiwan free trade agreement could jeopardize a US-China free trade agreement. Like maybe this is just a fairy tale.
So, you know, the thing about the US-China free trade agreement is it's really hard to envision the PRC accepting the kinds of high standards that Congress would absolutely demand. So I'm not going to say that you couldn't have a free trade agreement between the US and China. What I would say is that a free trade agreement between the US and China, it will reflect really powerful changes in the status quo in US-China economic relations and political relations. So I think those changes would not be inconsistent with Beijing saying it's okay with us for Taiwan to also be in this organization, right? So if China becomes liberalized enough to overcome all of the objections that exist right now to, you know, even unfree trade with China
right.
that exist in the US. If China liberalizes to that extent, then I think we will be looking at such a different China that I cannot say for sure what their position on Taiwan might be.
So it seems like the short answer is no, that's not likely.
I think it's not likely.
Fair enough. All right. Again, I could talk to you for days, but thank you so much for your time. This has been wonderful, and I think it'll be also very helpful.
Great. Good.
Can we get the name of your book one more time? I'm going to put an Amazon link below the video.
Okay. It's I'll put it in the chat to you.
Great. Perfect.
So what were you doing in Taiwan and China?
So China was right after graduation, and I'd studied science to do pre-med, and I didn't want to be a doctor, and I didn't want to work in labs anymore, and I wanted to do something interesting. So I went to China and fell in love with teaching. That's what this video right here is sort of a branch off of, you know, that decision 8 years ago. And then, you know, I was in Harbin and then went to Guangzhou, and I wanted somewhere, shopped around for somewhere nicer, went to Thailand, went to Philippines, went to Taiwan once, fell in love, and lived there for 5 years.
And where are you now?
Michigan based, in California at the moment, but based in Michigan.
And are you a teacher?
Yeah, I'm transitioning into tech, actually. So this is a huge, coming back to the States, and it's totally changing my career trajectory. It's some big shifts. Hopefully back to Taiwan one day, but probably not the near future.
Well, yeah, definitely. None of us is getting there in the near future, I don't think, just because of all the restrictions, but don't give up on teaching, okay?
Okay, I won't. I promise I won't.
Or, do ed tech or something that keeps you in education, because I can
100%,
tell.
100%. I'm in love with it. I mean, even this project, I'm doing debate lectures for probably the rest of my life, minimum. I like it too much, unfortunately. I'm addicted. I got the bug.
Yeah, fantastic. All right.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for accommodating my schedule.
Yeah, sure thing. Farewell. Bye-bye.
Bye.